Hello, welcome, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Aaron Diaz, and you're listening to episode number 12 of Live the Good Life from the podcast studios of Aaron's Wine Chronicles corporate headquarters in Richland, Washington. Today, our focus is on the Horse Heaven Hills AVA, a beautiful and expansive viticultural region of southeast Washington wine country. I like to call it God's country. I've driven out there quite a few times, and it's just amazing. With over 17,000 acres of vineyards, this appellation makes up over 25% of the planted wine grapes in Washington state. My guest today, along with previous generations of his family, have played a key role in farming and growing world-class fruit from this AVA. Andrews Family Vineyards own and farm over 1,300 acres of vineyards and, over the years, have provided the fruit for some of Washington's most coveted, delicious, and award-winning wines ever crafted. Over the past few years, my guest has embarked on a new project and assembled a team of experts with a mission of crafting pre-eminent wines that not only compete with, but surpass in quality high-end wines from France, Italy, and other renowned wine-growing regions. I personally have become a huge fan of what's happening at Andrews Family Vineyards. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the show Mr. Jeff Andrews. You brought your groupies with you, I see.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. It's really great to be here today.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Jeff, for taking time out of your day to come down and join our podcast. Why don't you give us a little background and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, yeah, I'll keep it real quick because I know we'll get into it more later. But my name is Jeff Andrews, as you said. I'm with Andrews Family Vineyards. I'm the managing partner of the operation. We grow about 1,300 acres in the Horse Heaven Hills AVA of Washington State, and I'm fourth generation on the family property.
Fourth. All right.
That's right.
So again, thank you for being here. You know, it's great having you on the show. As our tradition goes here in the studio, Jeff, we typically enjoy a nice libation as we move through the interview. Sometimes it's wine, sometimes it's scotch, whatever the case is. But for this case, it's got to be wine. And today's wine is a 2016 Sagemore Vineyard Merlot Cabernet Franc blend from the Wallach Slope. I tasted this wine at a special tasting at the Walter Clore Center back down in Prosser when it was open about 4 or 5 years ago with my wife, and we really enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoy it too. What are your thoughts on the wine as you're drinking it?
This is an awesome wine. I think that it really has a lot of great Washington characteristics that represent the best of the state, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to take a sip of this before we get rolling. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jeff, let's kick this into gear. Why don't you tell the audience about you personally? Maybe start with, where you went to high school, any college experiences that you had, how you met your wife, your kids, that kind of stuff, so people get to know you better.
Sure, yeah. So, of course, being fourth generation on the family property means I was raised in Prosser, Washington. Graduated from Prosser High School in 1999.
You were a Mustang.
I was a Mustang, yep. And like most, or a lot, I should say, of kids from Prosser, or kids who grew up on a family farm, I was never planning to come back. So went to WSU, majored in criminal justice, spent some time in the Marine Corps Reserve, went on to Seattle University School of Law.
There's a lot there. Wait a minute. So you were, 1999, first of all, you're kind of a baby. To me, 82 is when I graduated.
Okay, yeah.
But so you're U.S. Marine?
U.S. Marine, yeah.
Wow. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, no problem. So Marine Corps Reserve, while I was in college, honestly, Aaron, my service was pretty minimal, but did that. Was actually injured during training and ended up with a medical discharge. Oh. Before that injury, though, I had planned to go to officer candidate school and then law school and pursue a career as a JAG. So after the discharge, I decided to go on to law school anyway. But
it was criminal justice, which is another thing that piqued my interest because both my brothers are in law enforcement.
Oh, okay.
They both recently retired. One as a DEA agent. He was in charge of all the DEA stuff from Yakima to the Tri-Cities for many years. And then my other brother, Adam, of course, was a police chief in Toppenish for years. And then he was working for Jim Raymond at Franklin County as a captain for him for the llast 4 or 5 years of his career. And then he just retired. So both my brothers are retired, and I'm still working.
But maybe they did something right.
Yeah. But you were going into criminal justice, so I'm familiar with that passion.
Yeah. So my wife and I met at WSU.
Mm-hmm.
Moved over to Seattle together. Got married while we were over there. Like I said, I attended Seattle University School of Law, and while I was there, I did an internship at Safeco. It's called a Rule 9 internship. It's
Mm-hmm.
before you have your law license, but you can do some limited practice. And so during that time, I was writing legal briefs for attorneys at Safeco
Wow.
in a little office that's probably like the quarter of the size of your studio here. I'm just tiny,
Oh,
no
wow.
windows. Surprised I even had a door, right, to let me
Mm-hmm.
in. But I would write these briefs and sit there going, ooh, is this really what I want to do with my life?
Yeah.
And, finally realized it wasn't. I needed to be back home, connected with nature, doing something on the farm. So I graduated from Seattle University in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
stuck around for the summer, made sure I passed the bar, and then came home in 2006 to get started on the farm. Family-wise, I have two kids,
Mm-hmm.
14-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. Every parent's biased, right? So my kids are awesome. I love them. Really
Yeah.
fortunate to have them.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's a great story. Man, so you're an attorney, but are you using any of your attorney skills in what you do? We can talk about that a little bit later,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
you are okay.
For sure.
Okay.
It's been immensely helpful, of course, in dealing with contracts,
Mm-hmm.
but also with, every once in a while in business, you end up touching government entities, right?
Oh,
And dealing
yeah.
with regulations, and
Right.
it's always helpful to have
Oh,
that
good.
background.
So tell us about your family roots, your family history with Andrews Family Vineyards, and then of course its connection with the Horse Heaven Hills AVA. So because there's a long history of your family being entrenched there as farming family, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So I'll go back to basically the beginning. My great grandparents, George and Mabel Smith, were living right outside of Walla Walla in Loudon and farming there. And I don't know why, but they got the crazy idea to come on out to the Horse Heaven Hills in the early 1940s. Well, actually, a little before that, late 1930s. It's a time when there was dirt roads, no electricity,
Mm-hmm.
no telephones out there, no water. I really don't know what they were thinking, but I guess they were pioneers. So they decided to come on out to the Horse Heaven Hills and try their hand at dryland wheat farming. So, Aaron, I know you know, but the Horse Heaven Hills and our whole area in general, I mean, we don't get a lot of rain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on our site, we probably get 7, maybe 9 inches in a good year. And that's really not great for dryland wheat farming. But they decided to go out there. They got set up, and in the early 1940s, as they were just getting set up with their first crop, the U.S. Navy came in and they said, "Hey, you've got 48 hours to vacate the property. We're going to use this as a bombing and gunnery range for World War II." So they moved about 10 miles up the road for the duration of the war. Worked in the area for other farmers. In fact, my great granddad broke about 100,000 acres of wild sagebrush to farm ground over
Wow.
that time.
And that
I,
was all done the old-fashioned way. I mean, without.
it was,
I mean,
yeah, wasn't like horses pulling it out,
oh,
but it was cats with chains tied between
okay,
them
okay.
and going across the property that way to get the sagebrush out of the ground. It
Mm-hmm.
was definitely tiresome work. Again, they were pioneers doing things that I definitely
Yeah.
couldn't have done, or
Huge
I would try to
risk, right?
choose
I mean,
other things.
huge risks taking that they did back then.
For sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So they did that. They got the property back after World War II, and they set to work trying to grow some dryland wheat. And they struggled for quite a while. And my granddad, Bob Andrews, married into the family in the late 1940s and very quickly convinced the great grandparents that, you know what, if we don't get some water, this operation is not going to last very long.
Right.
So they drilled for water in the early 1950s, and we were so fortunate to find they were sitting on top of an artesian aquifer, which was amazing. It changed everything for us as a family. And over the years, then they were able to grow irrigated wheat, bring in cattle. The family's done corn, asparagus. Gosh, what else have we done? Mint roots, sugar beets. I grew watermelons when I was in middle school for the farmer's market. So you name it, we've probably done it.
Wow.
So fast forward to early 1970s, and the Mercer family planted some wine grapes out in the Horse Heaven Hills. They were the first. And my granddad watched them for a few years, and in 1980 he partnered up with my Uncle Rob. They planted 20 acres of Cabernet. They grew that for Chateau Saint Chapelle. did that for a few years, and then began working with Chateau Ste. Michelle.
Oh, okay.
At the time, my dad was growing diversified row crops, and he was in cattle as well, which was really probably his first passion in farming. But by 1994, he thought the wine grape thing looked pretty interesting, so he also put in 20 acres of Cabernet. And then as St. Michelle and the wine industry grew, I mean, that time period was really a golden period for Washington State, all the way up through, I'd say, 2017, maybe 2018. Anyway, so as the Washington wine industry grew, we grew right alongside them.
You continued planting more and more vineyards, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So when I came back to the family farm in 2006, of the 1,300 acres that my dad and I farm today, roughly 500 or so were planted to wine grapes, and we spent the next several years planting the remaining acreage.
Cool. Yeah, that's a lot of history there. Do you happen to have personally any formal training or education in enology or viticulture, or did that knowledge come, through the family lines working on the job? I mean,
it's all been on the job training through the family. My granddad and my dad have been awesome mentors throughout my career. Of course, when I was in middle school and high school, I got to spend school breaks working out on the farm, so gaining a little knowledge through that as well. But it has all been on the job.
Wow. So now that, you're kind of starting to take over the reins, or are taking over the reins, or have taken over the reins, what is your official title at Andrews Family Vineyards, and how would you describe your role and what it is that you do on a daily basis?
Sure. My official title is managing partner, and that can include everything from maybe the sexy, cool stuff of, strategizing, developing plans for what we want to do, where we're going to go, bringing teams together. It can also include driving forklift during harvest or changing light bulbs at the shop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, Jeff, what makes the Horse Heaven Hills AVA such a unique place that's capable of growing world-class wine grapes? What is it special? What's so special about it?
I would say, well, the Horse Heaven Hills, as you mentioned, it's 500,000 acres.
Yeah.
So it's hard to take something so vast and categorize it specifically into, hey, these are the things, right? Because it's so diverse.
Right.
I mean, you can go to the benches, right, and look at that, and that is almost its own place. Come up to our site in the central Horse Heaven Hills, and it's its own place by comparison as well. But I think the Horse Heaven Hills on the whole, it's in a Goldilocks zone in terms of temperatures, the way it accumulates growing degree days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the lack of rain is definitely a benefit because that gives us more or less complete control over the water situation and how we irrigate our grapes.
Probably wind, too, in certain areas.
Yes, Horse Heaven Hills has, 30% or so more wind than other AVAs.
Mm-hmm.
I think, my winemaker could probably speak to it a little more than I could, but the way the winds help develop the skin thickness and maybe then the tannins from that is unique in and of itself as well. And it's got a pretty unique soil profile. Bring it all together, and like I said, it's sort of a Goldilocks zone for a special place to grow wine grapes.
Yeah. So if we focus in on the 1,300 plus acres that I'll say AFV from here on out grows grapes within that greater mammoth AVA of the Horse Heaven Hills, what specific wine grapes do you grow, and what does the breakdown look like as far as 80% cab, 20%, whatever the case is?
So if I listed them all for you, we might be here for an hour. We've got 31 different varieties now. We just planted 5 varieties that we'd never grown before for a little winery here in the Tri-Cities, which has been pretty cool to do. But 31 varieties. Cabernet is by far the king, I guess, of what we have. We've got over 500 acres of cab. The next most is Merlot, Chardonnay, Syrah, and then we've got all these little sport varieties.
You said 31 varietals.
31 varietals, yeah.
Sheesh, that is a lot. So, and the more you get, the more complex managing those vineyards becomes, right?
Absolutely.
Because each varietal maybe has its own set of best criteria for how you want to grow them, right? I mean,
that's absolutely right. And so I guess that might be a little bit of the blessing and curse of the Horse Heaven Hills being that Goldilocks zone where everything seems to work. It definitely creates challenges when it comes to each variety. You've got to learn what they need. But if you can't learn what they need, it's a great place to grow them.
Man, it seems like logistically you got to be on it 24/7.
Definitely, but we've got an incredible team. So, I mean, we've got Todd Chapman as our vineyard manager. He's been with us for over 5 years now. He's really passionate about wine grapes, has a great history in planting vineyards. He's got a great history of viticulture work and has been a great addition to the team. But even beyond that, our management team, our assistant managers, Tony Flores, Pablo Bucio, who've been with our family for 20 and even 40 years, and the folks on their teams that have been with us for decades as well. I mean, there's so much institutional knowledge we have that adding one or two extra varieties here or there, they've got these varieties figured out. Now they can figure out the new one.
Yeah. So your AFV has been in business for quite a while. How is business going? And I mean, when you look at the sustainability and growth of AFV and its business operations, what are the most critical issues that keep you up at night from an operations and business standpoint and evolution and growth standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, AFV's interesting because at 1,300 acres, this sounds big, but we're not. We're kind of like on the big side of small, or maybe the small side of big, kind of depending on how you look at that. So, of course, our challenges are probably fairly different than a very large size or very small vineyard. But I would say that the biggest challenges that we face, and these are probably anyone in farming, water is crucial and key. Our water doesn't come from the Columbia River. It's from an aquifer. So we have to be very thoughtful about how we use water so we protect that resource over time. Labor, of course, is a challenge for everyone. Vineyard labor, it's skilled labor. These people, I mean, you throw me or you out there in the vineyard, we're not going to be able to do what someone who's been working in vineyards for 10 or 15 years can do. And so that's incredibly challenging to find these people who want to work in that and develop careers in a vineyard. So those are probably some of the biggest challenges that we face. But business in general it's good. I mean, the Washington wine industry has been on an incredible growth curve. We've been really fortunate to be part of that. Yes, it's maybe faced a few challenges over the last few years with the biggest winery having some issues, but I think they've got a plan and new team in place, and they're going to get that figured out. So I think the future's bright for Washington.
So on the other side, what's the most rewarding thing that your position brings you?
The absolute most rewarding thing would be working with amazing winemakers from across the state. And then, that would be on the vineyard side. On the winery side, meeting and interacting with customers through our winery, developing friendships and relationships with people you would never meet if you weren't in the industry.
That's a great segue into the next question. But, my question was going to be, so if you could name a couple, 1, 2, 3, 4 winemakers that you really respect in the Pacific Northwest that you maybe had a chance to engage with, who would those people be?
Sure.
And don't be biased. I mean, I know Ray is one of them because he's part of your team, right? I mean, I understand
Absolutely,
that. Ray's a great winemaker.
I got to set him aside.
Yeah.
So how about I approach it this way? How about wineries?
Okay.
So wineries that were pioneering, right, in the early days of Washington when there wasn't already an established market and nobody thought, like, oh, Washington, I'll buy a Washington wine. No, they had to go build the market, create an audience from the ground up. So you take those early wineries like, LaCole, right?
Woodward Canyon.
Canyon.
Yeah.
The Figgins family with Leonetti.
Right.
The folks who founded Chateau Saint Michel or Columbia, and these wineries where, like I said, there was nothing. And so it was a blank slate and they could create what they wanted to, but boy, what a hard environment to get going in. So you got to respect the heck out of all of them.
Yeah. So switching gears now, I've got a lot of little birdies out there. You might not think of it, but I do. My sources tell me that there's this little pet project that you've been working on for just a few years, and it's starting to take the wine world by storm. Can you bring our audience up to speed on this project?
Sure. I'm guessing you're talking about Trothe.
You would guess correctly.
Yeah. Trothe has been a lot of fun. It's been really exciting to see what we've been able to do so far.
Yeah.
We've been really blessed. So Trothe is our own wine label. We launched it in 2018, and the thought process behind launching Trothe was that the Horse Heaven Hills is an amazing place to grow wine grapes. There are fantastic wineries such as Quilceda, Passing Time,
right.
Andrew Will, others that use Horse Heaven Hills fruit, and they do an amazing job.
That's interesting that you say Passing Time because I had never tried Passing Time wines until we interviewed Jen here just a few days back. and she works with the Passing Time team.
Yep.
And she brought a couple of bottles of Passing Time wine, and it's just like, wow. I mean, this is. And then on the next interview for this podcast, you're
Yeah.
talking about Passing Time as that's cool.
I really respect what Damon and Chris Peterson, as the winemaker, have been able to do in really a short period of time. I want to say their first vintage was 12 or 13. So I don't think they've even been at it for 10 years, or maybe just about 10 years, and they've accomplished a lot. So where I was going with this was, you have all these fantastic wineries, but Horse Heaven Hills is often overlooked or underrepresented in the fine wine conversation when you think about great wines of the world. So we knew we had an incredible site. I've been watching what other wineries had been doing with our fruit for, by then it was 12 years. I had the opportunity to build a really great team at that time. And so we decided, hey, let's take a no compromises, basically good isn't good enough approach to building a wine that can sit at the table with the best wines of the world and represent Washington State and the Horse Heaven Hills. And that's Trothe.
That's quite the mission.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're the only people to think about doing that and to try to do it, right? And many people have tried, and I won't want to use the word fail, but they just haven't reached that level that they're shooting for. And I can say that I had a reckoning when I was able to come out and taste that 2018 first vintage that you guys put out, and I'm telling you, it was amazing. I think that if any team of winemaking people has the capability and the trajectory to get to where you want to be, it's you guys. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, that's really kind of you. Thank you.
It was in 2021 when I first visited you to taste that 2018 is the Trothe Cab Sauv, which I really loved. Then again in 2022 when the 2019 vintage rolled out, and now of course it's time for the 2020 vintage to be released soon. I quickly became a groupie of the Trothe line of wines. There's more than just the Cab Sauv too, right?
Absolutely. We have Syrah, we have Sauvignon Blanc, and we have a program we call our limited program.
That's the Malbec. Don't you have a Malbec?
So the Malbec was our first limited release.
Okay.
So the limited is a one-off program.
Okay.
So will we do a Malbec again? We'll see. It's vintage dependent.
Okay. But this whole thing about the Trothe line of wines that you're putting out, it's exciting. It's exciting for me because I've kind of been off to the side as a fan, watching it take off and been able to taste, these wines that you're crafting, and I've been able to visit the facility. We'll talk about the facility too. A lot of great things happening there. I guess I've got a ton of questions about Trothe. First of all, how did you pick your team? In particular, Ray. Ray McKee, your winemaker, and Justin Michaud is your assistant winemaker. And I've known Justin for a long time. Going out and visiting him in Prosser out there at the Coyote Canyon, and then Todd Chapman, you've mentioned him earlier as your vineyard manager, but these guys seem to be like, I kind of liken everything to the NFL. They kind of like a bunch of Pro Bowlers on the same team, How did you pick that team?
Yeah, I kind of like to use the sports analogies, probably too much as well, but no, I get what you're saying. So let me start with Todd. I got to know Todd over several years when he was at St. Michel, and he was a viticulturalist assigned to the Horse Heaven Hills, which included our vineyards. And he quickly stood out in my mind and my dad's mind right away as just an exceptional viticulturalist. The knowledge that he had and the time and effort he was willing to put into each one of the sites that he needed to go and do some work at. He was just kind of a cut above some of the others we had. Not that there's anything wrong with any of the others we had, but he was just exceptional. And so in 2017, as my dad got closer and closer to recognizing he was going to spend more time with his winery and fully step back from the vineyard, we decided to reach out to Todd and see if he would be interested in helping manage the vineyard, and thankfully he was. Ray's sort of a similar story in that I got to know Ray over about 10 years as he worked for Chateau Ste. Michelle, the red winemaker at their Canoe Ridge facility, and he made lots of Horse Heaven Hills wines, spent lots of time in our vineyard, and he's a winemaker who really is invested in the wine growing process, not just the winemaking process, and that was something that I really appreciated. Additionally, one thing I recognized with Ray, and I think this applies to really all the Chateau Ste. Michelle winemakers, is they have an incredible advantage in that they make millions of cases of wine a year. And in doing so, they get to work with different cooperages, different yeast, you name it. They get to try different techniques. They get to intentionally ruin a wine maybe and see what happens if you pick it way too early or do something maybe you shouldn't do. Winemakers who don't have that experience, oftentimes they bring in their 1 or 2 tons of fruit, and that's all they have. That represents their future. And so they have to work within some parameters or a box.
And they're
right?
very limited to what they can try. Otherwise, they've messed up basically everything that they have for that vintage.
Absolutely, right? So the risk-taking opportunity for them is a lot less.
Right.
So I felt like Ray had everything I was looking for. He left St. Michel in 2018, became a free agent, and I contacted him immediately. He was really my first and only call because I knew he was capable of making.
So did you know Ray on a personal level? Had you met him before and talked with him, or was this a cold call?
No. We met each other over the years through St. Michel, him being in the vineyards, growers' tastings, those kind of things.
Yeah.
All professionally. Since that time, we've grown to be friends, which has been awesome. He actually just lives a few houses down from me, which is pretty cool too.
Okay.
And then Justin, so my dad owns County Canyon Winery, and Justin Michaud is his winemaker. He's been making wine for him since, I want to say, 2013 or so. And when we started Trothe, we didn't have our own facility. We didn't have a home. And my dad was very gracious and said, come make it here. So that's how Justin got involved in the project.
Okay.
He did a great job in 2018 and 2019 helping make our wines, though since then he hasn't been involved.
Yeah.
Now we've been working with Ian Sellerite. We're not very good at titles, but he could be called our enologist or assistant winemaker. He and Ray worked together at some other facilities, and when we built our facility, we reached out to see if he would join the team, and he's been a really great addition.
Cool. Do you think you can keep this team together? I mean, that's always right. I mean, I'll go back to the NFL, right? You got a good team like the Cowboys of the 90s, and then all of a sudden, I'm a Cowboys fan. That's the only bad thing about Ray. Ray is a Steeler fan. I just can't stand the Steelers. But we won't talk about that. I hope Ray doesn't see this part of the podcast.
You can edit that out.
But do you think you can keep the team together?
I hope so. I mean, change is inevitable, right? So someday, I'm sure, everybody will go their own way. But for the time being, well, think about it this way, Aaron. We're about to release our 3rd vintage. I mean, we're really just getting started.
Right.
Yes, we've been working together for 5-6 years now as a team.
Right.
But there's so much more that we can accomplish. 2022 was the first year we made wine in our own facility, completely under our own control. And I think that'll show on the wine. They're just going to keep improving. So I think we're going to be together for a long time.
Cool. It would be great. I mean, you see what happens with Casita and the team going to Matthews and all those things happening. It's dynamic. I mean, in some respects, it's for the consumer. It's like, oh no, what's going to happen to the wine over here? Oh, and now maybe we should be going over here to taste these wine. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get that. So, I mean, long term, even if we stay together until somebody retires, inevitably something's going to change. But we're going to build a program and a brand that's going to be consistent for as long as we can do this.
Right. So your new tasting room facility is absolutely stunning. Is it open to the public or is it by appointment only?
It is by appointment only for folks who are on our Trothe member list.
Okay. Do you have any plans to eventually increase the bottle production of the Trothe wine line at some point in the future? And I say that because it is a very limited line of wines that you're putting out. You're focusing a lot of energy on quality, and it's not like you're making, 10,000 cases of wine for the cab, say. You're not, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, about plans maybe for eventually increasing bottle production?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think Trothe will ever be a 10,000 case brand.
Okay.
So Cabernet-wise...
And that's by design.
By design,
yeah,
for sure. Cabernet-wise, we're producing maybe a couple hundred cases a year right now. I think long-term it could grow to be 1,000, maybe 1,500 cases. Our Syrah, maybe we could grow it to 500. Sauv Blanc, maybe a couple hundred. So all in all, Trothe is probably going to be less than 2,000 or less than 2,500 cases when we get it exactly where we want to be in terms of growth.
And you're focusing the energy on quality, not quantity.
Absolutely. Yep, quality. We want to make sure that Ray and Ian can be as hands-on as possible in the winery. We want to make sure that we're only selecting from our best blocks in the vineyard. We don't want to, there's plenty of room for growth, but we don't want to try to outgrow them. So it's really important that we stick within, kind of that zone.
Yeah.
Outside of Trothe, though, we're getting ready to launch our next brand next year. that's called Sagebreaker, and it will focus first on Rhone blends, then on Bordeaux blends, and there's a little more room for growth in that brand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Blends, right? Because Trothe wine is 100% varietal wines.
Primarily 100%
Yeah.
varietal when we can. Yep.
Wow. So basically, you just answered that question that I've got there, right? About
Yeah.
about other varietals. So
Yeah.
but right now you're looking at Cab, Syrah. You had a limited release Malbec. Do you have any other varietals out there maybe a Carmenere or something? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, we just planted Carmenere.
Oh,
So Trothe is going to have the Cab and the Syrah and the Sauvignon Blanc, and then our limited program is what really gives us the flexibility to play with different varietals.
okay.
So with that program, we're going out into the vineyard. We're finding the all-star varietal for that vintage, and then bringing back a very small quantity, maybe 2 tons, for Ray to work with. So like you said, it was Malbec in 2019. That was our first limited. Our second limited, which we're going to release this fall, we really wanted to make a 100% Cab Franc. However, it just worked out that when we started blending just a little bit of Cab to see if we could make the wine just that much better, it was. So it didn't end up being 100% varietal. So it's a Cab Franc Cabernet blend. Looking out into the future, we've got 100% Grenache on the way. Looks like 100% Malbec following that. And this year's candidate so far, it's still kind of early in the vintage, but we're looking at Sangiovese.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it should be fun.
You think maybe on the horizon there's a Super Tuscan maybe that you might think about putting together?
We have talked about that. You never know.
See, there's a lot of excitement for me personally because I can just see. I've experienced the quality, and now it's just like, oh, what else can they do at this level, right?
Sure.
Because then it just raises the bar across the board.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal with limited. It takes a little bit of trust, right? People who come to us maybe for the Cab first, then they look at our limited line and go, okay, they're really good at the Cab. Are they going to be good at Mourvedre? Well, the goal is to be. We hold ourselves to the exact same standards. We have a lot of experience with a lot of these different varietals. Again, going back to Ray's experience at Saint Michel, so I think we can perform.
Yeah, you touched on my question about what's happening in the next 5 to 7 years. The Sagebreaker line is exciting for me too. When are you going to start the first vintage of that being available to the public?
Sure. We're still working on the release date, but it will be next year.
Next year. Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
And we'll probably release the Rhone blend first, and a few months later the Bordeaux.
So all said and done, what is so special about Trothe? What makes it special?
It's a great question. I would say the terroir, the team, the commitment. If you think about Trothe and what Trothe means, we thought really hard about what we wanted as a name to represent our brand. And Trothe is a Middle English word that basically means fidelity or commitment. So we're trying to embrace that in everything that we're doing. So when it goes to the terroir, we need to focus on showcasing that terroir in our wine, have fidelity to that terroir, accept what Mother Nature is giving us each season. When it comes to the team, being true to our team and what they need to do to perform at that level, give them the tools that they need. But the people ultimately really are what makes something unique and special at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a good answer. It's funny when you were just saying that about, defining Trothe, it just dawned on me, the word betrothed when you're getting married, right?
Sure, yeah.
And the first time it's dawned on me because for the longest time I was like, Trothe Wines, Trothe.com. I couldn't really make any sense of it.
Yeah.
But now that you've said that, it just makes perfect sense. So, okay. So, what would you say is the biggest challenge right now facing the Washington wine industry? In your position, you get to engage with a lot of people across the industry. You're selling fruit to people. You're making your own wines. You're out there. What do you think is the biggest thing that's facing the industry coming up here?
I think the biggest challenge facing the industry is the same challenge that it's faced for decades, which is, despite the incredible fruit quality, getting the attention that it deserves on the national and world stage is always a challenge. There's so many great wines that come out of California, so many great wines from around the world. Washington deserves a place amongst them, even above many, if not most of them. and ensuring that the consumer has the opportunity to recognize that is a challenge.
That's really in line with what Jen Nance said on the previous podcast. I asked her the same question, and she says identity for Washington wines. Identity. And I really resonated with that. It's exactly what you're saying, essentially, right? Because Oregon is known for Pinot Noir, right?
Yep.
California is known for what they're known for, the fruity, the cabs and the zins and whatever. And then Washington is a potpourri of things, right?
Well, it really goes back to what I said, even about the Horse Heaven Hills being in that Goldilocks zone where everything does well. I mean, that statement can apply to Washington.
Yeah.
So many different varieties do well. You can't pigeonhole it as a 1 or 2 variety state.
And there's nothing wrong with that, though, right?
No,
but it's just how do you get something that's your flagship?
Yeah, I think the flagship for Washington is the superior quality. Mm-hmm. So whether or not we're going to be, I mean, there's been times people said Syrah needs to be our variety or Merlot needs to be our variety. Just whatever variety that you're making, whatever wine you're making, make it to the highest standard, and that's going to help Washington.
And that's what you're doing at Trothe.
That's the goal, yeah.
So if you weren't doing what you do for AFV and Trothe, what would you be doing, Jeff?
Ooh, gosh, where would I be? I'd probably be somewhere in my legal career.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably wouldn't have come back to the family farm, and I don't know.
Who knows where that would have led?
Yeah,
right?
No idea. Probably living on the west side of the state still, so I'm better off here.
Oh, yeah. We're better off that you're here. So what are you most looking forward to over the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, man, Aaron, have you seen how thick these glasses are?
Yeah.
I'm pretty nearsighted. I can't see that far into the future. Next 3 to 5 years is going to be really interesting. Launching a brand like Trothe from year one, saying that we belong at the table with the best wine of the world, with the best wines in the world. That's kind of a wild ride to make that happen. So over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to do our best to accomplish that goal, and we'll see if we get there.
Yeah. No, it's lofty, but you know what? If you don't try it, you'll never get there. If you don't go out there and do it.
That's absolutely right. You have to put yourself out there.
Yeah. It was great. It was great hosting you today, Jeff. Before we go, though, could you please remind our audience again about both Trothe Wines and about the Sagebreaker line that's coming out soon, too, because that's news to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in Trothe Wines, you can visit trothe.com. You can click on Join the List and register for our upcoming allocation. If you're worried about missing out on the allocation, we've had some really good press this year, and we've had a lot of customers say, hey, I don't want to miss that. Can I sign up early? So we've got club options available for people who want to commit early. They won't miss their allocation. People who are interested in Sagebreaker can visit sagebreaker.com and sign up for information from our mailing list.
And for those of you out there who aren't familiar with them, you've got to get familiar with them. Get online and make an appointment for a private tasting. You will not regret it. It's just outstanding stuff. Jeff, I'd like to thank you again for joining us on Live the Good Life. And that's all we have for today's episode. Again, for more of Living the Good Life, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Aaron's Wine Chronicles or online at aaronswinechronicles.com. And for a video podcast version of this episode, visit my YouTube channel at the @ Aaron's Wine Chronicles 6666. Thank you all for listening, and remember, wherever you go, whenever you can, always live the good life. Until next time.